HIV and AIDS, they often face discrimination. It could be in the workplace, it could be in a school environment. Here in Hong Kong, are they protected under the law?
Yes, Hong Kong has pretty progressive laws to protect against discrimination on the grounds of HIV. Disability is widely defined under the ordinance to cover all forms of physical, mental, and even infectious diseases, including HIV. And so it's very much covered so that people with HIV should be protected against indirect or direct discrimination, harassment, or vilification.
They should be protected. Are they always?
The law is there intended to protect people, and it means that they have a right of recourse if they do suffer discrimination, but
we know that it still happens.
It still happens.
Are there any exceptions?
In the workplace, there is an exception if you can show that it's an inherent requirement of the job not to have that disability. So that would mean that there has to be a key purpose for the job not to have HIV. And before preparing this interview, I tried to think of professions where you could justify that, and I can't think of any.
Can your employer ask you to reveal and disclose your status and whatnot? I mean, how much privacy are you entitled to?
Some employers ask for medical checks before you commence employment. That shouldn't include an HIV test unless the employer can justify why they need that for the inherent requirements of the job. And as we say, I can't see how that could ever be justified.
What kind of a job would actually, you don't know?
I can't think of a job that you could say that because of your HIV status, you shouldn't be able to have that job and that be a legitimate
So you could not be denied employment as a result of a positive
Exactly,
HIV
that shouldn't
test.
happen.
And yet a lot of people are so afraid they don't get tested because they're fearful of that exact kind of discrimination.
Yes.
It's not just people living with HIV who could be stigmatized, right?
That's right. Family and friends of somebody who has HIV could be equally stigmatized. And the legislation is actually wide enough to include protection against associates. An associate is very widely defined to include essentially family and friends, and so anybody that people associate with. And so if that person suffers discrimination as a result of being a friend with someone with HIV, then that person would have the right to bring claims for discrimination. Similarly, if you're perceived to have HIV, so your employer perceives because of your lifestyle or because you have a friend who has HIV that you might have HIV, then that's also protected against.
So you would also qualify potentially under the
So you would qualify and have a right of recourse if you suffer discrimination because of your perceived infection.
What does somebody need to do? Obviously a lot of documentation if they feel that they're being discriminated against. What advice would you give?
Discrimination is usually in a very subtle form. People don't tend to be very blatant with it, and so you tend to have to infer discrimination.
How do you prove it?
It's difficult, but we advise clients to keep detailed notes. I advise clients to keep diaries of things that are said, comments that are made in the office, things that are overheard, and that in itself, and trying to find people to support your version of events, it's usually in the form of subtle things, malicious gossip, isolating people from office, excluding them from meetings, and it's just a matter of keeping detailed notes and documenting them.
It seems like it must be a very difficult thing to prove in the court of law.
Before someone would go to the district court, I would always advise them to file a complaint with the Equal Opportunities Commission. The Equal Opportunities Commission is not a court, but they have strong investigative powers. And so they will take on board your complaint, they will write to your employer if it's in employment context, and ask questions, ask follow-up information, obtain documents, get witness statements, and they have very strong powers to compel that. And they tend to do a very good job of getting to the bottom of discrimination if it has happened.
Sadly, the stigma does exist, and so I'm sure there are people out there who are living with this discrimination and are probably too afraid to come forward. What would you tell those people?
If you want to prevent discrimination, unfortunately, the only way to do it is to come forward. The Equal Opportunities Commission, again, would keep things very confidential. If you were to take the matter to court, you can apply for what's called an anonymity order. So you would file your case under the name of AB or something like that, so you don't have to have your name on public records.